Today, joined by Nat Walker. Nat has been with Vodafone for 6+ years, designing conversational AI solutions, manifest itself in their bot called TOBi, access on their mobile app or through their website. Great conversation with Nat today, from family weddings and how everyone knows what the likes of Nat and I do, right through to how Nat and her team are taking Vodafone on a journey of using conversational design, how they've actually incorporated conversational AI into their mobile app and how they're augmenting those journeys. And listen out to some really great advice from Nat, and specifically around the often asked question nowadays, which is AI going to take our jobs? And I think Nat's answer summed it up brilliantly. It's not large language models or AI that'll take our jobs, but it's someone who knows how to use these technologies to ultimately enjoy the lesson. Nat Walker, welcome to the Syndeo Podcast. How are you this afternoon?
Good, thanks. I'm coming to you live from sunny Stoke-on-Trent in the north. Yeah, it's good. I've actually got all my team in our office today, so it's been a really great day. The whole team's here.
Fantastic. Well, it doesn't look too sunny, but then again, I can't see too much of the outside. I do hope it's actually sunnier than it is in Belfast, but
sadly
actually
it's
today
not.
I'm just peering out a window here. Today's not too bad, but
sadly it is
miserable.
torrential downpour here as well. The least sunny place ever, actually.
Well, we'll not go into. I know we had a few technical issues before we joined the podcast. For two technologists, it took. We'll not let our audience know it took us the best part of 20 minutes to get Zoom working, but we might run another series of podcasts at some point on the do's and don'ts of Zoom. But let's not go there. Nat, you give me a little bit of background. So you're currently working with Vodafone. You're working in conversational AI and particularly UX. So I'll let you'll explain your background obviously much better than I.
Yeah, so I've been part of the kind of Vodafone journey into conversational experiences for 6 years, nearly 7 years now. So at Vodafone, we've been live with a customer-facing chatbot called TOBi since 2017, and I've been here since day one, pretty much. So part of my kind of remit here is around our overall experience with the bot, including like conversation design as a specialty, our NLU maintenance, and exploring like kind of how we can innovate with that space, but still have, you can imagine, quite important for Vodafone, complete control over an experience. And yeah, I've been part of this for 6 years. Prior to that, I was kind of a freelance designer, and I worked on projects for Google, Design Museum. Swarovski is a random addition there, non-tech. And yeah, it's kind of been an exciting, frustrating, difficult, but awesome journey to this point, really. And feel lucky every day to be involved, really.
And obviously, it's quite an interesting time in the industry. Mm-hmm. Conversational design, I know it's become, I guess, a lot more, well, maybe a lot more. People are starting to get familiar with it, but obviously you've been doing this for years. And going back to my own history, we used to do what we call VUI, voice user interface designs for IVRs for 15, 20 years ago. And people didn't really understand the importance of how you ask questions and how you elicit response. And it is a real skill, I guess. So just, give me a little bit background into conversational design and the type of things that you and your team are looking at, and I guess what's the importance of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it there with IVRs. Like, it's always been a thing where people know what a conversation is, but I think in real life there's that kind of rich set of cues that we all instinctively know in our sentence structure, in how we make eye contact, even over Zoom, body language and signals, and that tells us when it's our turn to interact and when it's our turn to do a thing. The difficulty in where conversation design comes in, I suppose, is where a machine doesn't, or whatever that platform is, doesn't care about those cues and actually can't digest them. And this is where our conversation design team are focusing on translating those cues into ways of writing, ways of structuring dialogue or a journey, so that for us customers know when it's their turn to speak or their turn to interact or give us a piece of information, and make it super easy and not scary. Because it's important to note, like, this technology, you know, we've design has been around in IVR and things like that for a while, but for customers it feels like it's moving very quickly. It's like a perception that companies have very quickly implemented things like bots, even though IVRs have been around for quite some time now. And it's bringing them along, and the big focus for the conversation design teams is kind of supporting him in that, making it so easy that they're not put off by this new technology. The word bot isn't a scary thing. It's there to make things a bit easier and a bit quicker, and translating those very human elements of a conversation to something that's powered by a machine ultimately.
Yeah, and we'll probably pick up on a few of those elements. And I know, again, as the technology, I guess, evolves from an AI perspective, things like sentiment and empathy and understanding are starting to become, I guess, more accessible. And I mean, what challenges would you normally face? Because I'm thinking back again, I'm going back to years when we were doing voice user interfaces, and obviously one of the challenges we faced then, that, you know, there's no physical manifestation of it, so everything is down to the cognitive process that happens within your brain when you hear a piece of audio and how you respond to that. And I know on a chatbot, say, for example, or conversation AI, you have a degree of visual representation or visual cues, but it's still quite limited. It's, okay, you can do images and graphics, but still a very textual type input compared to, you know, a mobile app or a website or whatever. So, you know, what are the typical challenges that you see being faced, both from the consumer as well as then from, you know, you're obviously working in Vodafone from the organization perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from a customer kind of point of view, there's when you do have text, it could be a benefit, but also it's an extra opportunity to introduce difficulties, especially if you think accessibility or reading ages are really important to actually be able to get the information across. And with, you know, I'm talking from Vodafone specifically, we sell and provide that many products. You easily stray into jargon land, which can disconnect people up front from what you're trying to talk about. And sometimes there's no avoiding that jargon, but it's about, okay, how can we leverage this visual aspect to break that down and make it really simple to understand? I think this is where I misquote probably, but the reading age is around like 8 to 10 years old for, you know, UK consumers. So you've got to be conscious that complex topics have got to be broken down to be understood at that level across the board. Easy to say, actually a bit harder to do when things are complicated. And I think on the flip side of that, for kind of the development and design teams, is people are quite unpredictable, and to provide an easy and straightforward experience, you want to give them the flexibility to talk how they talk or how they naturally type or spell or speak. But then you open up infinite branches of your journey to digress. And, you know, we see it every day when you go and look through transcripts, like, people are not predictable. That's the same in any conversation. But the difficulty you have when you're building a bot or a voice bot, whatever medium, is preempting that and how you handle that. And then some of that is probably the trickiest thing, and it's going to be a case of some days it's like, oh, we should have thought of that, or that's so obvious that would happen. But sometimes it is like, oh, that desire path that people establish of how they want to use things will surprise you, and it's because you have the natural bias of your company, because you know those processes, you understand those questions, and being able to think, okay, how would someone else perceive that is tricky.
Yeah, and maybe we'll come on to this, how the, you know, projects typically structured. But I remember going back some, you know, projects we would have worked on, particularly whenever some of this more natural language, be that voice or text, come to the fore, and it was very much, you know, we just want it completely open, and we want the user to say. And like, my view was quite often, well, why would you do that? You know, you have to balance the, let's direct them in a certain way, because, you know, we as the organization, or you as the organization, understand what products and services you're able to handle on this particular channel. So therefore, why let them say anything when you know there's only a certain few things? So do you find that yourself within the likes of Vodafone, where your stakeholders are maybe, just want to have it completely what we used to call open, as opposed to some form of directed dialogue? And I know that can be a dirty term in some regards, that people think, oh, it's a very structured mechanism.
Yeah, and I think there's like two parts to that as well. Like so I've got a whole thing about just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that is very applicable to chatbots, and especially when they're kind of the hype, they're everywhere across the business. Every proposition or product or new thing wants to have a journey, and sometimes they don't necessarily require that, and customers don't want that either, because it's not the right channel, or a chatbot isn't the appropriate way to get help. And I'm just thinking about how many of those we've had over the time at Vodafone. So one of the things, we've tried to be really focused on a framework of, okay, what is valuable in a bot? What can a bot bring that's valuable versus a page or part of the app? Because it doesn't have to be in all of those places. Some things do require a back and forth, and we've probably gone on the more flexible side, and we probably are quite open for users versus getting them on railroads. Thankfully, a lot of that decision is held within our kind of bot center of excellence. It's not necessarily something we call that, but it is essentially that. It's more about the content going into the bot, where we would see pressure or expectation from wider areas of the business.
Yeah.
But because we've put quite a lot of work into defining what is a valuable chatbot experience, that's a bit easier to manage in 2023. Ask 2018 that, and that's probably a different answer you'd get, where I'm bombarded with requests.
And it's and I'm going to explore a little bit more about Vodafone, but you're doing, TOBi is within the app. Is TOBi on the website, and is there a voice element to TOBi, or are some of those yet to come, or roadmap activities?
Predominantly chat, and it's open to customers and non-customers yet. So it sits on the website as well as in the Vodafone app. So it's largely kind of existing customers who can authenticate to get into journeys. There is a very new voice element to that. So not fully live to customers yet, but we've got quite a mature IVR at Vodafone. So it's at the stage where it's, again, the value thing. So versus a conversational bot, and that's distinct to an IVR. So it's not live to customers yet in terms of a new voice medium of TOBi. Quite established in chat though.
But that's ultimately the path of travel that you guys will go over the next number of years.
Yeah.
And again, I've had some debates with customers of ours around, when you embed, let's say, TOBi or the chat or the conversational AI within the app. One school of thought is, if you have to do that and put a significant amount of functionality within the conversational AI in the app, your app has failed, because by definition, your app should be easy to use. It should be intuitive. I mean, what's your view on that? And I guess, where do you strike that balance? Because you could ultimately try to replicate everything in the app in conversational AI, or you could try to have an app without any conversational AI. And where do you get that balance, and how do you strike it, I guess?
I think for me, it's about complementing. If the app is the central point for your users to get support, how can a conversational experience enhance it, not duplicate it? I'm very strongly against duplication of the same kind of user journey, because exactly some people's school of thought, which is, if you can do it simply already, what's the need for this? But I still think that people crave someone hearing them, and so the way to address that sometimes is through a bot. Like, it sounds unnatural, but you've been heard because you've been understood about, okay, I did this thing in the app, maybe it didn't do exactly what I needed, how can I get further help? And business objectives are different place to place, but if that is, okay, let's focus our free up our human staff to do the really meaty, difficult, complex stuff. If we can still address some stuff through a bot and it complements our app, let's do that. So I think they, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think they can complement each other, is I suppose the crux of it.
I was going to ask, do you, and again, whatever you can disclose, do you find many of those journeys where the user maybe has struggled to do something in the app, then is coming into the chat or into TOBi and saying, I was trying to do X, Y, Z, and I've got stuck or I've got lost, or?
Not necessarily. I think because of the nature of Vodafone business is there's simple things that they find the information, but they have further questions. So billing is a great example of that, because you can have a really straightforward bill. You might want to question those charges or why you've paid for a certain thing. That is something that's hard to do in something like an app. Much easier to do in a dialogue where you can say, what does this mean? Why have I been charged this? And then it's all in one interaction, but you've probably, you might have 4 different questions about one bill. I wouldn't even like to think about how hard that would be to design within an app and make it so kind of simple and easy. And that's where they complement each other, be able to access your bill through the app, ask further questions with a bot. And then, if there is something further than that, make it super easy to speak to a person as well. And they become one team. They're a team.
I was going to come on to that, the agent piece, because again, traditionally in the industry, I mean, but clearly, well, not clearly, in the industry, there's 2 key aspects. There's one, driving really good customer experience. Second is, how do you do that operationally efficiently? And you can have a highly efficient operation and a terrible experience, or you can have a brilliant experience that costs you enough fortune. Again, balancing that, and I remember going back some old systems we were building many years ago, and it started out with the classical deflect. We don't want agents. Let's hide all the options to speak to an agent or engage an agent. I mean, what's your view there? Do you feel that, you should be doing that? And I kind of know the answer. Well, I hope I know the answer to this, but you should be doing more of that or less of that, particularly when you're trying to design and I think your focus is on a really good experience.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know. I'm going to say, I don't think you should hard deflect away from people, because that part of the thing with bots in particular is building trust for people with that tool or platform. And if you are hard, walled garden, no further help, that trust is unlikely to ever be there. Now, I appreciate there's going to be hard business objectives, and a lot of the time that's going to be to do with cost saving and maybe cutting out contacts or something in that area. There's still a way to do that isn't about completely eliminating the human element for me, and that could be time saved. One of the ways we did that is that a bot is brilliant at doing things right every time because it's programmed. Authentication is something that anyone that's ever had a chat with any business, that's something, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's PIN, the 2nd and 6th digit of your PIN? And, just because of the nature, that's going to take a little bit of time. It's something that can be sped up. I think it's around 5 times faster minimum with a bot, conversationally even. And so you can still achieve those cost saving objectives in that, because if you've got contact centers, they're spending less time on some of their chats. Even if they need to take those chats, you're freeing them up quicker because you're doing some of the processes that automation does really well, that humans tend to have a little chat in between. And, and that's still a great cost saver, but it's going to be that lovely experience, because the goal is for the customer to get what they need to do done. And sometimes that's going to require complexity that you want to keep that trust there.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're chatting there, I was just thinking it's one of your competitors, I shall not name whom. They have a very frustrating experience, and I've used it because I'm a customer. And so you will use a bot, and as you say, using the bot sometimes, and okay, I'm in technology and involved in these systems, therefore I'm easy pickings in that sense. But I'll do maybe the ID, the identification and verification process, and I'll go through the bot, the automation to do that, and then ultimately, if I need to contact to or connect to an agent, they will quite often put me through the same process again. And I really does, I'll not use the words. It's the most frustrating thing. And I think that's a process thing. It's not a tech, because CTI, telephony integration and passing data has been around for, again, 20 years. So the technology is here, and it just really makes me scratch my head to think why, and I assume it's processing, why organizations frustrate customers like this.
Yeah, and because I think there's a general, not necessarily, perhaps less so in tech kind of people, but you would assume that the research would say people want real people to talk to. And actually, at least in the research I've been involved in, that's not the case. That what consumers and what users of these things want is simplicity and speed. And if that is a bot, or if it's a bot human blend, they're fine with that. You know, at least from this insight, it's getting it right. And actually, that's what matters. So I think when you kind of give into the, oh, you know, the bot is going to be this, or they're not going to like this, then yeah, because if you're not putting the focus on the right element of the experience, they're probably not going to. But we know from this research that is not what real users think. But they will think that if you keep them trapped and you deliver like a really poor experience, because you also won't manifest your cost savings, because if you have other channels, they're probably going to go there of contact.
No, I agree. And you know, the analogy I've used for years now around automation is the ATM. You know, it's so if I want to withdraw money from my bank, you know, going down to an ATM at whatever time, midnight on a Saturday, if I'm ever out at midnight on a Saturday, we're early nowadays, but anyway, to pick something up, maybe a beer, and if I walk up to the ATM and I press 3 buttons and I get £40 or whatever it is out, I know every time I press those buttons, without fail, certainly without fail for me in many years, it gives me the money. It's a good experience. Is that a better experience for me than waiting to Monday morning to queue up in a bank to speak to a bank teller to ask them for my £40 or whatever it is? I fundamentally believe it is, but it's simple and it's trusted and it works every time. And I think that's part of the secret of any level of automation, you know, whether it's AI or conversational AI or IVR. So, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that.
Totally. And because we adopt technology in every part of our lives, accept it, and then it's almost like this kind of, oh, but bots are different. Conversational AI is different. These kind of, you know, when the big GPT scariness, you know, that's different. And it's actually not. It's about how we leverage it to enhance our day to day. And I love that. I might steal that from now on, that example.
It is. I mean, it's brilliant. And I would also say, if you, and I forgot the number now, how many hundreds of thousands of ATMs there are in the UK. So my, again, continuation of that, if you were to announce tomorrow morning in the government, all ATMs were being banned, there'd be absolute uproar. Whereas if you said all IVRs and all bots are being banned, there would be probably loud applause from lots of people.
Yeah.
So
until they had to call a manual switchboard.
Correct. Stand in a queue or wait for someone to connect. But funny, and you mentioned there the GPT and ChatGPT, which is obviously all the rage. Funny, I was at a family wedding at the past weekend, and the whole talk of lots of people at the wedding was AI. How was it going on? Of course, most or a lot of the family friends knew what I do for a living, you know. So it was how AI was going to destroy the world and take over the world, and how we're all doomed. I mean, maybe I don't know whether you get this at family gatherings or outside of your work environment, Nat, do you?
It's funny, yeah. Like sometimes I think, thanks for the compliment. You're asking me a question that I could never answer. Like, they'll ask me about how do they work? Like, how are these structured? And I feel like I wish I had the way to answer that for you. But yeah, it's funny, like it's also over the years, it's been interesting how hard to describe my job it's got, because UX was hard enough. And then when you get into this, you're like, so it's AI. And then we shape how that feels for people. And then, but yeah, since GPT, because it's a common language, everyone can now talk about these things. Like the questions have shifted. Like, do you think they'll change your job? Like, is it going to change the way that jobs work? And I suppose, yes, that is going to change all of our jobs in some form, I suppose, this access to this new technology. But I'm going off on a tangent maybe, but you know, for TOBi specifically, and when we've got a business with like an NLU based bot like we have today, I don't think there's an immediate change that we'll see, because something like Vodafone is so tightly regulated. Like we're an FCA regulated company. That risk right now is not worth it. Not to say internally though that we can't leverage that technology to make a better experience with our current bot, or to condense masses of information into simple processes. That point we had right at the start about how do you make something really complicated straightforward for customers? Hey, we might have something that we can leverage here. But yeah, the questions are gonna, family, friends, senior leaders in companies, I think they're gonna keep coming if you have AI anywhere near your job title.
Indeed. I mean, and again, as much as you can discuss, large language models are obviously very de rigueur. They're everyone's talking about them, be that friends, families, or CEOs of corporations, and wanting to know. Again, I was at a meeting last week and with a company, and they want to do a board presentation around how they're going to leverage generative AI. And my first question is, well, what is it you want to achieve? What's your outcome here? You know, but you touched on a couple of things there around, you know, you're an FDA regulated company. I mean, what's the thought within Vodafone to leverage large language models? Because most of us know that, yes, they're fantastically good at giving a really good conversational engagement. They're not always correct. So from again, take Vodafone as, you know, with the regulations and the compliance you have to adhere to. I mean, how are you guys thinking about how you might, you know, leverage something within a large language model, but still keep it within the context of a regulated industry?
I think it's about being really sensible and clear about what exactly what you said, what we want out of it. What do we want to achieve with it that we're not achieving with something like an NLU based automation or something like that? And okay, if that is that there's that delta there about what we're not achieving but we want to, can we control it? So I think there's there's obvious clear ways we could do that that's lower risk, like condensing. I always say they're ironically called frequently asked questions, because often they're not frequently asked at all, but they're just questions. But you know, condensing all of that knowledge into a way that's super digestible. And I think, you know, out of what we can talk about, that's where we'll be going. And it's until we have a clear way to ensure that everything is accurate, equitable, like that we're treating every interaction the same, because that's the other risk of it is bias creeps in. How do you make sure that is controlled, especially when you've got so much data about customers and you know how they use their phone and how you use this? Being super sensitive with how you use that is going to drive the, you know, the when of it all, because I think it's a when, not if.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And any, you know, organizations we're talking to, working with, it's the same thing. They're still going through the I wouldn't say evaluation phase, but they're looking about how they can leverage. And I think the answer thus far has invariably been yes, with these caveats. And the job and responsibility is for us as technologists and vendors and providers and supposedly knowledgeable people in this space is to help them with those caveats. Because it's the easiest thing in the world to say, yeah, use GPT, use a large language model. It'll answer all your questions and solve everything. We all know it won't, even though there are some people that might think it will. Going back to, again, the Vodafone project as much as you can. So the volumes, and I was trying to look it up, and I ran out of time before I jumped on the call here. You had a brilliant meme I seen the other day on, you went to Unparsed, and again, I was away on holidays last week, so I did miss that, and it sounded like a really good event. But there was a meme that you threw up around. Explain that as much as one can in a non-visual sense.
We'll flash it up somewhere. So it's very much about the journey of us creating TOBi. So it's an important context that as of kind of now, TOBi takes nearly 1 million chats a month. So that's 1 million unique interactions a month, and that's from less than 1,000 a month, if that, right at the start, you know, one singular non-integrated journey back then. And so the meme that Oliver's talking about is during that time, between like low chats to nearly 1 million, is we added over 250 additional journeys. And note that I said journeys and intents is somewhat separate, because that was well over 350. And on a slide, that sounds great. To execs, you added 250 extra journeys, great. And that is great until it's not great. And the meme is around that if you have low code platforms and it's really easy to add stuff into a bot, and you continue to do that, your NLU is going to struggle to get ahead above water, and probably your conversation design teams are somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, because they're trying to balance 300 individual journeys and get them really human centric and get them written really well. And so maybe I'm not doing the meme justice.
No, I whenever we publish this on LinkedIn, we'll do a wee link to your meme. It was brilliant. I think it captured, and I'll say I'm sorry I missed the event in London. Was it last week or the week before? I know I was on vacation there, so I did miss it, but it sounded like a great event as well.
Yeah, shout out to the Impulse crew. It was a brilliant conference, first of its kind, I believe, on conversation design.
So conversation design and Vodafone. So Vodafone, large organization, probably been around. I don't know how old Vodafone is, but I would imagine, like most large organizations, are set in their ways to some degree. So how do you go about convincing, if that's the right word, an organization like Vodafone to pay attention, utilize, and really maximize the skills that you and your team have in conversational design?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a long journey, I suppose, 6 years of doing that. And it's funny how it's changed as well in that time. So making this as a legitimate practice, and as you say, somewhere like Vodafone, which is huge as a company. We're the UK branch of that, but there's a Vodafone in lots of countries that our group team kind of unite. And we started by calling it kind of conversation analysis, but actually they weren't analyzing, it was creating. And and actually back then when we started, probably conversation design, niche kind of pockets, people were referring to it as that. But certainly if you went into any meetings with your senior management, they're not going to know what you're talking about. Is it UX? Is it content? What are you talking about? And so the way that we've kind of built that, and I've said trust a few times, but it is exactly that, is they might not understand the details of the practice, but they need to see the value of it. And so there's a few kind of ways we did that, as some really simple as, and I will recommend this to anyone that is setting up a new conversation design team in an org, is relatively early on, probably a couple of years in, we started doing exec design sessions. And now I will say semi-risky, because if you do end up with one of your C-suite or senior leaders that have a random skill in conversation design, you run the risk of them showing you up, but not likely, believe me. And in that, it was about, okay, understanding what it takes to get a dialogue live, or make it feel human, or make it feel natural, or as human as we want to go. And that was actually something like a light bulb moment to go, oh, this is a thing, I guess. But the biggest way, because obviously that's one thing and you can understand it, but if you've got a budget and I'm asking for designers, or we're trying to build a team, you've got to prove the value of it. So what we did a huge focus of tying conversational changes and designs to core business KPIs. So going into how you kind of prove it's successful. There's the cost saving element, so measures like containment, which take chats out of the business with the frontline advisors. But then there's the experience one. So exactly your point earlier, like you could easily achieve 100% containment because you could trap every customer in a bot experience with no out. They're probably not going to tell their friends and family it was great though. So if we then measure the experience of it, like, is this person going to tell their mom to try this bot, or are they going to tell their friend that I had a chat with TOBi and it actually surprised me because it did this thing. And so being able to tie design to like those benchmarkable KPIs like TNPS, effort score, satisfaction, resolution was the biggest thing to convince leadership of its value. And it's exactly that in a nutshell. Prove the value, and then it'll prove your legitimacy. And UX went through a similar phase not so long ago in organizations. UX was the current, what is it? What does it do? What is psychology? What are you talking about? And it's the same thing. Tie it to the business KPIs, and that's how you get the support, the trust that you're going to deliver on it. And here we are. We're actually an established conversation design chapter in Vodafone UK now.
Which is brilliant. And again, because you've been on this journey, not only building 250 journeys, but the journey of taking Vodafone into the world of conversational design and the importance of it. And when, whatever, 4 or 5 years ago, when chatbots started to become quite popular, I think there was very much, and I've seen it in a lot of organizations, we'll build you a chatbot. And the reality is anybody can build a chatbot in a matter of hours, probably. So there's a lot of this, it's really easy. The technology's simple, throw it up there and then run away from it. And I think, and again, it's history always repeats itself in my view. And when we started, remember doing speech recognition back in the early 2000s, and it was the same thing, like brilliant, it works. The reality is you need to feed what I call feeding water to these systems. You need to be reviewing. And obviously that's how you guys have started. You said you started from a small number of journeys and you built up over the 6 years.
Yeah, we, and being completely honest, is probably, in that time, not the best. With hindsight, you go, why did we decide to do that? But that's hindsight for you, isn't it? But we started with 1 or 2 non-integrated journeys. And by non-integrated, I mean giving out basic information, but actually it was information that you could probably get from the site as well.
Yeah.
And we knew fairly early that to get back to my value point, to get value out of it, it's all about personalized experiences, integrating into customers' accounts, being able to do the thing. So it's no good telling them that they can go and do it themselves, because they're in, to you again, your earlier point, that they're in that chat for a reason, because they need support. So it's important that the chatbot can go actually do things. And so one of those 250 journeys, actually probably one of the things we necessarily didn't get entirely right is adding more of that non-integrated stuff. And talking about maintaining them, we suddenly realized that that's when suddenly become less accurate. So actually getting to those good integrated journeys is harder. You suddenly got less time to devote to crafting the journey, iterating on the journeys as you learn more about how customers are using it, because it's an overwhelming amount of conversations. You can't possibly review 800,000 chats unless you have a team dedicated to it. And so it's also about acknowledging that because this is quite a new path, we're going to not necessarily get it spot on every time. So then, because then we've proven the value, at least at Vodafone, of the value of having a bot, we've got that trust to say, hey, we should take some of this out now. Let's cull some of this content, because it's not doing what you need anyway. So let's be a bit courageous, a bit brave, and focus on those really specific, actually useful use cases.
Yeah, it's the comment you made, a while back on the frequently asked questions. I agree with you. It's a complete misnomer. The frequently, again, I've seen this for customers. We'll give you a list of, 40, 50, 60. Here are all our FAQs. Can you put these all into the bot? Okay, we will. We reviewed them in 2 months' time, and 3 questions have been asked of a specific type. So, and I think trying to wean customers or organizations off that is difficult.
Yeah, I mean, even internally, I'm blessed in that I'm on the client side. So we have one company to worry about. But even then, like, if you're trying to tell someone who owns a proposition, hey, it's probably not going to make it to a dialogue, because here's the data that shows me that, sorry, no one's asking about it. Or they're certainly not asking about it in the way that you're telling me. And it's that jargon thing again, is that when we name something, doesn't mean that customers are going to call it that. This is not necessarily a product we had. I think back to Brexit, and when people were asking questions about what they meant for their roaming, they didn't say, hey, how's Brexit going to affect my charges, which is the perfect question. And of course it would get it right. They're saying things like, when we leave the EU, what's going to happen? And, that's where it's translating they don't mean to the world. because
Yeah.
none of us can answer that. They mean specifically about the context of them as a Vodafone customer. And it's that mindset for the business to go, customers don't speak like you do because you understand this. This is new to them, or this is different for them. So yeah, I think we managed to do that by proving out because we do measure our accuracy. That's a KPI kind of we share across the business as well to say, hey, this is how accurate, through testing methods that TOBi is today. And you could see the night and day between here's with all this stuff that nobody ever asks. And over here is when we focus it on what people really need help with. And, the scores shoot up. And then it's suddenly, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so sounds like such an easy thing to say, like having the data to back up those things makes such a difference.
Yeah, and again, it's another, and I think as this whole space becomes more mature, I think organizations are now investing. Clearly, Vodafone are with the team, and it's obviously you have a conversation AI team around it, but I guess there are lots of other elements to the overall team that make TOBi a success that it is.
Yeah.
And I think organizations are more willing to invest, I guess.
Yeah, and having those cross-functional squads is super important for delivery because a design team can't do it on their own. And we're fortunate in Vodafone to have been kind of embedded as part of our digital function. And that is a game changer because TOBi was actually born in like a customer care area as a bit of a proof of concept. Hey, is this going to do what we need it to do? And actually what that meant is you're kind of developing a complex piece of kit over here, but you're separate to your main digital function. So by being embedded in that, that's super helpful because that cross-functional squad delivery of different skills, design is a key part of that, but so is a developer, and so is a product owner, and so is the people that's driving all of it forward. That's, I think, the way we've been able to move at some considerable pace actually through the years.
I think that's an interesting point. Again, I've seen it, over the years, that demarcation between what is customer care or contact center technology or whatever you want to call it, vis-a-vis the the digital, the marketing, the website, and this rather large wall between the two parts of the organization that just simply do not communicate or talk. And I'm glad to hear that that's the way Vodafone are handling it, because I think you've got the proof points to show that it's fundamental to the success. If you don't, you're probably starting with failure pretty much guaranteed or limited success, should I say, maybe.
Yeah. And, you mentioned on past, in part of my session in that conference, I talked about the importance of people at the center of all this. And I am, anyone that's listening will not be surprised if they've talked to me about this ever, is we should not gatekeep these skills either, because for Vodafone, this is quite easy. We've got a large frontline organization, but they are gold mines for information. They understand customers and they're going to translate what that means for a customer, because we all know that what people say isn't sometimes what they mean. So they might ask for a thing, but what they're talking about is something, it's like a nuanced version of that. And that's where kind of contact center and care actually supports a digital function. And it's as simple as involving them and ask about, is this hitting the mark? And for people that deal with customer complaints or something like that, what can we learn from them? Like, how can we prevent that complaint getting to them in the future by something like a chatbot? And so it's that human element in a digital function is how we're going to make it good. And that is even down to reading the transcripts. So I know at RASA they call it, they've got the term CDD, the conversation driven development, something that we absolutely live by, which the stats will tell you some, but you will only fully understand it if you're in that moment with the user and you go, oh, they said what? And it did what? And driving your backlog and your roadmap with that stuff as well. So people are the center of this, and without it, that's why, the scary question at weddings and events when our LLM is going to take over. nah.
Yeah, well, yeah, my, you know, and it's the same with every technology. I think now, obviously, AI will develop and change, but my answer is typically it's not the technology, it's the humans who use the technology that make it good, bad, successful, or otherwise. You know, now
Yeah.
obviously AI will evolve. I'm sure at some point it has a
Is
higher
that,
level of intelligence than it currently has because it's a very LLMs are very good at
yeah,
understanding language and words. That's essentially what they're very good at.
yeah. There's that quote, isn't it? That's like, LLMs won't take your job, but someone that knows how to use them might. Um,
That is actually that's spot on, and I'll be using that one again. I think you're absolutely right, and that's I think that's where it's going. The conscious of time, and I've used up a lot of your time not so far. But before we wrap, you've obviously been involved in this for quite a while. Where do you see it going? And I suppose, I mean, you've obviously had a lot of success. What you've done at Vodafone with TOBi, and what are the things that you're thinking of, right? You know, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months that we need to be considering.
well, right as one we were just talking about, LLMs are not going anywhere in terms of discussion points. I don't think they're, and those advanced technologies are going to be, I think, center of those. For me specifically, that is about how does this job and how do the design teams in this job today evolve with the tech, and how does that change? Because it's going to be elements that will get easier, but then I don't think there will even be no need for a design team, for example, but the way that you control the experience might differ. That's,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm probably cheating there because it's actually not 6 to 12 months. That's probably further out than that. But I think the thinking is going to be, this coming year is going to be the thinking, the how, the when, and I don't think that's unique to Vodafone. I think that's anyone out there in a similar area is going to probably have the same discussions for the next year. So it's
Yeah.
probably a bit of a cheat answer there because that's the obvious one.
No,
Um,
I think it's. I mean, it's it's the one that's in eye line and eyesight for everybody. So, I mean, I think it's as I say, being able to talk. It's probably the first time in a long time, and I've been in the industry now too long, but the first time in a long time where you're at a social or a family occasion and people are coming and asking you about what you actually do
yeah.
and trying to understand. Because many years ago, and he said, you know those systems that you press one and you press two when you ring such and such? Well, we build those, and we used to look at you with disdain
Like,
and disdain. So at least I've had actually people coming and buying me drinks as well now, which is
oh,
and so,
tell me more.
uh, so I think it's actually an interesting time to be in the industry, definitely, and there's lots of change, and there's obviously getting quite a high profile. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to more of the same.
Yeah. To more and more difficult questions at public, like at family events, and you're like, oh, don't know the answer to that one. But no, I am glad like my mum semi understands what I do for a living now. So, if
Well,
nothing else, that's something to be proud of there.
yeah, well, we can thank ChatGPT and OpenAI for their wonderful marketing and have enlightened probably half the global population, if not more, in terms of what people like yourself and to a lesser degree what I do. So hopefully it continues in that vein. Nat, thank you very much. It's been brilliant chatting to you. Really enjoyed the conversation. Depth of knowledge as always. Thank you. And I think certainly we'll pick up again in the future and maybe we'll come back to you in maybe 6 or 12 months and
How's that thinking gone?
see how that thinking's gone to see how TOBi's performing.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Of any opportunity to talk about it, and I'm there. So it's been great.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much.
Well, it's been a great chat and it'll be a great listen for our listeners. Thanks, Nat.
Thanks so much.